My Rich Dad's lesson number 2, which was in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, was why teach financial literacy, or the importance of financial literacy. My real dad, like I said, was the head of education for the state of Hawaii. He was a great school teacher. And he always believed in word literacy. In other words, the ability to read books, which is a very important skill. My rich dad, on the other hand, said if you want to be rich, you also need to be financially literate. In other words, if you can't read financial statements, you can't read numbers, he says you're financially illiterate. So to be rich, I had to read financial statements. And he started teaching me that at the age of 9. One of the big, should I say, discussions or arguments was that my poor dad always said, son, our house is our biggest investment and it's a very important asset. And my rich dad would say, see, your man may be very smart, but because he can't read financial statements, he's not financially literate, he cannot tell that his house is not an asset. If he could read financial statements, he would see that his house is really a liability. So one of the controversies of Rich Dad, Poor Dad has been that most people believe, because they go to their banker and the banker says your house is an asset, or you go to your real estate agent and say your house is an asset, because people are not able to read a financial statement, they actually are not able to tell the difference between an asset and liability. So lesson number 2 of my Rich Dad, which is a very important lesson, was why teach financial literacy. And one of the main reasons you wanted to be financially literate was so that you could make your own more appropriate, more exact financial decisions. For example, starting at the age of 9, my rich dad began teaching me how to read financial statements with these very simple diagrams. So, like I said, at 9, this here is income, this is expense, this is asset, and this is liability. This is the basis of financial literacy. So most people think their house is an asset, but because they cannot read a financial statement, what they really do not see is that your house is actually a liability. What determines if something is an asset or liability is not what your banker says or what your accountant says, but what determines it is the most important word in business, and that word is cash flow. So my rich dad very simply said an asset is very simply something that puts money in your pocket. So this is what an asset looks like. When I read a financial statement, I'll see money coming into my pocket income statement. It's an asset. And he said a liability is something that takes money from your pocket. And so this is the cash flow pattern of a liability. So what's happening to the average person out there is they're buying a house thinking it's an asset, but if you really look at the cash flow pattern, the cash flow is flowing out of their pocket, not in. And that's why my rich dad said, for most people, their house is not an asset. At that moment, it's really a liability. Now, he wasn't saying don't buy a house, and I'm not saying the same thing either. I'm saying just simply do not call a liability an asset. So another part of being financially literate is understanding the vocabulary of finance. For instance, the word mortgage. Most people say, well, I have a mortgage. The definition of the word mortgage actually comes from the French word mortier, which means death. So when you say I have a mortgage, it means I'll be engaged in debt until I'm dead. And that's what happens to people. So if you can read a financial statement, you'll actually see why your house is not an asset, because what you have on your financial statement here is you'll have the word mortgage right here. And so when the bank says your house is an asset, or your banker says your house is an asset, he's not lying to you. He's just not saying whose asset it really is. So if you could read a financial statement, you'll see that on your statement it says mortgage under the liability column. But if you go across town to your bank's financial statement, you'll find that your mortgage is listed under his asset. And the reason it's an asset to him and a liability to you is because, again, your mortgage puts money in his pocket, and your mortgage takes money from your pocket. And that's why in most cases, your house is not an asset. It's really, well, it is an asset, but it's really the bank's asset. So it's the importance of financial literacy if you want to be rich, is why, again, I created the board game Cash Flow. But I think the most important thing in the game is this income statement and balance sheet right here, which actually teaches you